Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal felt like your whole world cracked open? You stop believing not just in people but in yourself. You start doubting every word, every promise, even your own reflection. In this video, I'll tell you how I learned to trust again. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. Through a strange journey in Denmark, and through the soft rhythm of the English language itself. The night everything fell apart. It started on an ordinary Tuesday night, the kind that doesn't warn you your life is about to split in half. I was sitting by the window, half listening to the rain, when a message popped up on my phone. One message, one truth, and suddenly everything I believed in became a lie. You know that moment when your chest feels both empty and too full at the same time? That was me, sitting there, holding the weight of betrayal in my shaking hands. For days I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My brain replayed every conversation like a cruel movie on loop. The laughter, the promises, the words that once sounded like love now echoed like mockery. It's strange how betrayal doesn't shout. It whispers, and the echo lasts for months. First, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too naive, too open, too trusting. But later I realized, betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. Yet your brain doesn't care about logic. It only knows pain. The part of your mind that used to release happy chemicals for trust suddenly treats trust like poison. I remember walking through Copenhagen that night, long after midnight. The streets were empty, wet, glowing under yellow lights. The city didn't care about my heartbreak. It just kept breathing. I envied it. I wanted to be like that. Calm, unbothered, still moving forward. When I finally spoke again, my voice cracked. It felt foreign, as if it didn't belong to me anymore. That's when I realized, my healing wouldn't come from silence. It would come from speaking again. From hearing my own voice tell the truth. From learning how to use words not to hurt, but to heal. So that night, under the Danish rain, I whispered to myself in English, slowly, softly, "You're still here." It sounded awkward, but it was the first time I believed something again. When words turn into weapons. Have you ever noticed how some words stay long after the person who said them is gone? They echo in your mind like ghosts, quiet but sharp. That's what betrayal does. It turns simple words into invisible knives. I promise. Trust me. It's not what you think. Those phrases, once gentle, now slice through your peace when you least expect it. After that night, I realized how powerful language truly is. We think words are soft, but they build our memories, our self-image, our entire sense of safety. When someone lies, it's not just the words that break. It's your inner translation system. Your brain starts doubting its own dictionary. Every "I love you" sounds suspicious. Every compliment feels rehearsed. There's actually a science behind this. When trust is broken, your amygdala, the emotional alarm system in your brain, goes on high alert. It scans every sentence, every tone, searching for hidden threats. That's why even neutral words can sound dangerous. Your body's just trying to protect you. The problem is, it can't tell the difference between real danger and emotional memory data. So I stopped talking for a while. Literally. I avoided people, messages, calls. I even flinched when someone said, "Hey." My world went quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that screams. And then something strange happened. I realized I missed words. I missed their rhythm, their warmth. I missed the way language could connect two strangers and make them feel less alone. That's when I decided to rebuild my relationship with words, but in a new language. English felt safer somehow, like starting over with a cleaner slate. Each word was unfamiliar, so it couldn't hurt me. It couldn't remind me of the lies. I started small, listening, repeating, reading aloud. At first my accent was heavy, my voice shaky. But for the first time, words weren't weapons anymore. They were bridges. They carried me somewhere softer, somewhere I could breathe again. And maybe that's what healing is. Learning to speak without fear, even when your heart still trembles. Denmark, my place to breathe again. When I first arrived in Denmark, I felt like a ghost walking through someone else's dream. The air was cold, sharp, and clean, like it was trying to wash something off me. The people didn't rush. The sky stretched wide and gray, as if time itself had slowed down just enough for me to catch my breath again. At first, I didn't come here to heal. I came because I needed to escape. To be somewhere where every street, every word, every face was unfamiliar, so that my past couldn't find me. But Denmark surprised me. The silence here wasn't empty. It was gentle. The kind that listens. Mornings were quiet except for the distant sound of bikes and seagulls. I started walking by the harbor each day, watching reflections on the water. There was something about that calm, repetitive sound of waves that made me feel like I could start over. Healing, I realized, doesn't happen in big moments, it hides in small ones. A cup of coffee warming your hands, a stranger smiling on the bus, the sound of rain on glass. I enrolled in a small English conversation class in Aarhus. My teacher, a kind woman with bright eyes, spoke slowly, clearly. Every word was like a soft step toward trust. The first time I spoke aloud, I stumbled, but she didn't correct me harshly. She just smiled and said, "Good. You're learning to speak again." That sentence hit deeper than she knew. Denmark became my quiet therapist. Every day it taught me something. That peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning how to breathe while remembering. It means forgiving yourself for believing the wrong person, and forgiving them not because they deserve it, but because you deserve to move on. In a way, this country and this language saved me. English gave me distance from my pain, and Denmark gave me space to practice it without judgment. Every word I spoke here felt like a small rebellion against the silence that betrayal had forced upon me. And maybe that's what trust really is, choosing to open your mouth and speak again, even when your voice still shakes. Talking to myself in English started as a joke. One night, while making tea in my little apartment in Aarhus, I caught myself saying out loud, "Okay, now pour the water, good job." I laughed. Who was I even talking to? But that tiny moment became my new ritual. Every day I started speaking to myself in English. Slowly, clearly, like I was teaching a child how to trust words again. At first, it felt ridiculous. I stumbled, mixed tenses, and forgot simple words. But the strange thing was, I felt lighter. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just talking without fear of being judged, misunderstood, or betrayed. English became my safe space, my second skin. When you speak another language, your brain literally rewires itself. Scientists call it neuroplasticity. New pathways form, new connections spark. You start thinking differently, not just in grammar but in emotion. I noticed that in English I was calmer, softer, less defensive. Maybe because the language wasn't tied to the memories that hurt me, I began narrating my days. Let's go for a walk. You're doing fine. It's okay to be tired. It sounds silly, right? But those phrases became tiny lifelines. When your heart has been broken, your brain forgets the tone of kindness. By speaking to myself kindly in English, I was reminding it, reprogramming it. Sometimes I recorded my voice and listened back. It was strange to hear myself. My accent thick, my rhythm slow, my words simple. But underneath all that, there was honesty. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just being. And that's how I started healing, by talking to myself one English word at a time. It wasn't about language anymore. It was about rebuilding the conversation between me and my own heart. So, if you ever feel lost, talk to yourself. Out loud. In any language. Because sometimes your voice is the only one that can remind you you're still worth listening to. Listening to silence. There's a special kind of silence that only exists in Denmark. It's not the heavy silence of heartbreak. It's lighter, almost respectful. The kind that lets you exist without demanding anything from you. I first noticed it during winter. The streets were quiet, the air smelled like wood and coffee, and even the snow seemed to fall slowly. Like it didn't want to interrupt anyone's thoughts. I began walking without my headphones, just listening to silence. At first, it made me uncomfortable. You see, after betrayal, silence feels dangerous. It gives your mind too much room to wander, to replay every lie, every "I love you" that turned out to mean nothing. But then slowly something shifted. I realized that silence wasn't my enemy. It was my teacher. In silence, you hear yourself breathing. You hear your thoughts unfiltered. You start noticing sounds you used to miss. The creak of a floorboard, the hum of your fridge, the distant laughter from a neighbor's window. All those tiny sounds reminded me life was still happening quietly, steadily, around me. One day, sitting by the lake in Aarhus, I closed my eyes and started listening in English. I literally translated the silence in my head. The sound of wind? Calm. The sound of water? Still. My heartbeat? Alive. That's when I understood. Language isn't just for speaking. It's for noticing. For naming the world so you can belong in it again. Psychologists say your brain calms down when you name what you feel. It's called labeling emotion. And maybe that's why this practice worked. By listening to silence and naming what I heard in English, I was taking control of my story again. Now, every time I walk alone, I let the silence talk first. Then I answer quietly in English. It's our little conversation. It reminds me that healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a whisper between you and the world. Because when you finally learn to listen not just to people but to silence itself, you also learn to hear your own peace coming back. The science of trust and the brain. Here's something your brain doesn't tell you. After betrayal, it actually changes shape. No, seriously. MRI scans show that when someone breaks your trust, the amygdala, the fear center of your brain, fires up like a car alarm that never turns off. It keeps scanning for danger, even in safe places. That's why you flinch when someone says, "Trust me," even if they mean well. Your brain isn't dramatic, it's just overprotective. But here's the beautiful twist. Your brain can heal. It's called rewiring through repetition. Every time you do something safe, kind, and predictable, Like listening to calm voices or repeating gentle words, you teach your brain that not everything will hurt you. That's exactly what English practice did for me. When I started listening to slow English podcasts, my brain didn't just learn language, it learned safety. The human voice is powerful like that. When we hear speech patterns that are calm, steady, and kind, our nervous system relaxes. It's science, but it feels like magic. Sometimes I'd sit in my kitchen, cup of tea in hand, and repeat short English phrases I just heard. I'm okay. It's a good day. I can start again. My accent was thick, my rhythm awkward, but each repetition carved a new neural path, a tiny bridge of trust inside my brain. Language is more than grammar. It's pattern recognition. When you train your ear to catch the rise and fall of words, you're also training your emotions to recognize rhythm, predict calmness, and feel connection. That's why listening like a native isn't just about English fluency, it's about emotional fluency too. And over time, something subtle happened. My amygdala quieted. My heartbeat didn't race when people spoke kindly. My brain began to believe again. Slowly, gently, word by word. So if your trust has been broken, don't rush to forgive. Instead, retrain your brain. Listen to voices that feel safe. Repeat phrases that sound kind. Because healing is not about forgetting the pain. It's about teaching your nervous system a new language of calm. Learning to love the sound again. There was a morning in Copenhagen when I realized something had changed. I was sitting in a cafe near Nyhavn sipping coffee, half listening to a group of tourists chatting in English. Their laughter filled the air, bright, careless, full of life. And for the first time in years, it didn't sting. It didn't remind me of lies or broken promises. Just sounded human, warm, alive. That was the day I fell in love with sound again. You see, after betrayal, everything you hear becomes tinted with suspicion. Even your own voice sounds strange, like it belongs to someone else. But slowly, through the daily rhythm of English practice, I began to recognize a softer tone within myself. When I said good morning, it no longer felt forced. When I laughed, it didn't echo emptiness. It sounded real. I started recording voice notes every morning. Simple reflections. Today feels better. I'm still learning. I think I'm okay. Then I'd play them back. First I cringed. My accent was uneven, my pauses too long. But then something happened. I stopped hearing the flaws. I started hearing the courage, the quiet determination in every breath between words. Music helped too. I began listening to English songs, not just for language but for emotion. I'd close my eyes and let the melody teach me how to feel again. When I sang along, my pronunciation improved, but more importantly, my soul did too. Psychologists say that sound and emotion share the same neural pathways. That's why certain voices calm you while others trigger you. I learned to curate my sound environment. Soft playlists, slow podcasts, voices that felt safe. Over time, those sounds rewired my emotional rhythm. And that's when I realized, learning English wasn't just about communication, it was about reclaiming my voice. Every sentence I spoke clearly, every tone I softened, was proof that I was healing. So, if you've ever hated the sound of your own voice, remember this. It's not your voice you hate. It's the memory attached to it. Change the story and the sound becomes beautiful again. When trust becomes your accent, there's something magical that happens when you stop chasing perfection and start speaking with honesty. One evening, while chatting with a Danish friend over dinner, she smiled and said, "Your English sounds different now, not more fluent, just more you." I laughed, but later that night I understood what she meant. My words were no longer hiding. They were finally showing up as themselves. For so long I thought trust was about other people, about finding someone who wouldn't lie. But standing there speaking in a foreign language with my messy accent and all my broken grammar, I realized trust begins here inside your own mouth. Every word you say with sincerity is a small act of courage. That's when English stopped being just a tool. It became my mirror. It reflected who I was becoming. Softer, stronger, clearer. I didn't need to erase my accent. It carried my story. Every sound, every hesitation, every tone held a piece of what I'd survived. My accent wasn't a flaw. It was evidence that I'd learned to trust again. Sometimes people ask, "How do you know when you've healed?" I think it's when you stop rehearsing your words. When your sentences flow not because they're perfect but because they're true. When you no longer translate your feelings into safety checks, when you just speak and it feels okay. Denmark taught me that trust doesn't return in grand gestures. It returns in the small, everyday sounds, the good morning to a barista, the thank you to a stranger, the I'm okay whispered to yourself before bed. Each one adds up like notes in a song you thought you'd forgotten how to play. So now, when I speak English, I don't worry about sounding native. I just make sure I sound real. Because trust, like language, is something you practice. And the moment your voice carries both your pain and your hope, that's when trust becomes your accent.